He appeared in our house when I was 6. Not a ghost, not a monster from under the bed. Something much stranger. We called him the Quiet Man. I first saw him late one evening. A silhouette in the doorway of the living room, tall and incredibly thin, like a shadow cast at the wrong angle. He didn't move, just stood and watched. I didn't scream. For some reason, I knew immediately that screaming was useless. My parents didn't notice him. No matter how much I tried to point, their gaze would slide right through him as if there was nothing there. "Play your games, dear," my mom would say, smoothing my hair. They didn't see his long, pale fingers slowly stirring the air, as if plucking invisible strings. The Quiet Man never came close. He just appeared in different spots around the house, always at a distance, always silent. At the end of the hallway when I ran to the bathroom at night, in the reflection of the window when no one was in the room behind me. He stood by the fence in the yard while I played in the sandbox, his motionless figure stark against the bright summer sky. Over the years, the fear didn't go away. It just became background noise in my life. I learned to live with it, to not look into dark corners before bed, to not linger in the bathroom, to always turn on the light before entering a room. He was my personal, quiet nightmare, and I had forged a fragile truce. I pretended not to see him, and he simply was. Everything changed on my 16th birthday. We came back from dinner, and I was in high spirits. My dad, laughing, put the key in the lock, but the door wouldn't open. "Jammed," he muttered, jiggling the key. I looked at him and froze. Over his shoulder, in the living room, visible through the glass pane in the door, stood the Quiet Man. But for the first time in all those years, he wasn't at a distance. He was standing right against the door, on the other side of the glass, and his face, usually blurred, was so close I could make out the hollows where his eyes should be and thin, dry lips stretched into a barely perceptible smile. "Dad, wait," I whispered, but it was too late. A click, and the door swung open. The living room was empty. I let out a breath, blaming it on nerves and a glass of champagne. That night, I woke to a sound, a quiet, insistent scraping, like a fingernail being dragged across glass. I lay there, holding my breath, listening. The sound was coming from the window. My heart sank. My room was on the second floor. Slowly, fighting paralyzing terror, I turned my head. Outside the window, in the impenetrable darkness, his face was hovering. He wasn't on a ladder. There simply wasn't one. He was suspended in midair, 2 meters off the ground, staring at me. His pale finger was slowly, with unnatural persistence, scratching the glass. I shrank into my pillow, unable to make a sound, praying it was a dream. In the morning on the glass on the outside was a thin, thin scratch, a perfectly straight line running from one edge to the other. From that day on, the rules of our game changed. The Quiet Man began to approach. Now I would find him standing at the far end of the hall, and a moment later, after blinking, I would see him 3 steps closer. He appeared in the mirror behind me as I put on mascara, his hand almost touching my shoulder. I felt an icy draft emanating from him and heard a very, very quiet whisper, impossible to make out, that filled my head with static and panic. I realized he was warping reality around himself. Clocks would slow down in his presence. Light bulbs would flicker and die. The air would become thick and heavy, impossible to breathe. He was slowly pushing me out of my own world. The doctor diagnosed panic attacks and prescribed sedatives. My parents looked at me with pity and worry. I stopped trying to explain. I was trapped alone. The climax came today. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea and trying to read, feeling goosebumps crawling up my spine. I knew he was near. I looked up. He was standing in the doorway. Not at the end of a long corridor, but right here, 3 steps away. The distance he had never breached. His figure, usually indistinct, was terrifyingly clear. He was dressed in something dark and old, like a decayed frock coat. His hands, long and bony, hung at his sides. And his face, God, his face. There were no eyes, no nose, no mouth. just smooth, pale, wax-like skin stretched taut over his skull. I couldn't move, I couldn't look away. The air froze, and the only sound was the frantic pounding of my heart. And then he spoke. His voice wasn't a sound, but rather a vibration that entered directly into my brain, the creak of rusty hinges. "It's time," echoed inside my head. He took a step forward, then another. The ceiling light flickered and went out with a soft pop. The room was plunged into semi-darkness. I recoiled, knocking over the chair, and scrambled for the door. But the door was gone. In its place was a smooth wall, cold and damp to the touch. I turned around, pressing my back against the plaster. He was now a centimeter away from me. Icy cold radiated from him in waves. I closed my eyes, expecting the end, but his hands didn't grab my throat. His long fingers gently, almost tenderly, rested on my temples. And I understood everything. He didn't want to kill me. He wanted my place, my life, my reality. He wasn't a ghost from the past, but someone from elsewhere, someone who craved warmth, light, and a simple human biography. And he had found a loophole. Me. Pain shot through my head, as if white-hot needles were being driven into my brain. I felt my memories, my thoughts, my very self being pulled out like film from a projector. Vivid images swam before my eyes. My first day of school, my mother's hugs, the smell of a pie, laughter with friends. It was all draining away from me, being absorbed by that pale, faceless entity. And then there was emptiness. I opened my eyes. I was standing in the middle of the kitchen. The sun was shining through the window. Everything was in its place, but everything was wrong. The colors had faded. The sounds were muffled. I raised my hand in front of my face. It was mine, but I couldn't feel it. It was just a shape. And then I saw her. She was standing by the stove, pouring herself tea. She had my face, my smile, my movements. She was humming something, a tune from my childhood. She turned and looked right at me. Her eyes, my eyes, were warm and alive. And in their depths swirled something cold, familiar, and ancient. She smiled, a wide, happy smile. "Don't stand in the doorway," she said with my voice. "Come, at breakfast." And I went, because I had no choice, because I had become the quiet man, a shadow in my own home, a ghost in my own life. And now I stand here in the doorway and watch as she lives for me. And I wait. I wait for the door to open for someone else so I can find new life to take, to feel warmth again, if only for a little while.